In the shadowed corridors of global power, a new and dangerous game is being played, one where the rules are written in blood and the pieces are moved by invisible hands. While the world stares at the explosive friction between Israel and Iran, a quieter but far more unpredictable player is shifting the board from the shadows. France. They aren't the good soldiers the Americans expected them to be. In this high-stakes theater of shadows, the United States and Israel find themselves in a tense 2-against-1 confrontation with an isolated Iran, yet the most unsettling variable isn't the enemy in front, it's the ally standing half-turned away. The military situation over the last 24 hours has been a hall of mirrors, filled with AI-generated propaganda, deep-faked battle footage, and media lies designed to stir the pot. But the true essence of the crisis lies deeper than news headlines. It lies in the strange, almost hostile role of France. Why does a nation that shares the same Western values as the United States and Israel refuse to fall in line? Why does France always seem to have a chip on its shoulder, a rebellious streak that prevents it from being a good boy in the American-led world order? The answer is a long, dark history of drama, betrayal, and a fierce desire for a sovereignty that most other nations have long since traded for American protection. To understand where France is going, we have to look at where they've been. In previous conflicts, the coalition was predictable: the US, the UK, Canada, and France. But today, the United States is standing remarkably alone in its crusade against Iran. Even within the US, the consensus is fractured, split between those who want total war and those who want a fragile peace. Across the Atlantic, the Europeans are hedging their bets. Britain, Germany, Italy, Spain, they are all charting independent paths, but none are as provocatively detached as France. They aren't exactly betraying America, but the fire in the relationship has died. The first reason is purely circumstantial. The era of a unified Western bloc ended when the Trump administration began slapping taxes on allies and questioning the value of NATO, leaving Europe feeling like a jilted lover who decided it was time to move on. The second reason is more cold-blooded. Europe, and specifically France, looks at this Middle Eastern conflict and sees it as a war of convenience, not a war of morality. They know the US won't lose, so they feel no obligation to help. They see the US and Israel bullying a regional power, and they suspect that once the fighting stops, the Americans will simply pack up and go home, leaving Europe to deal with the inevitable refugee crisis and the economic fallout. For France, it's a simple calculation: why should they rush into a fire that isn't threatening their house? They view the accusations against Iran nuclear racing and the funding of proxies as serious, but not yet apocalyptic. And in that hesitation, they have deeply offended the heart of Israel. The tension between Israel and France is a festering wound that dates back to the era of Hitler's rise. France has a complicated relationship with the Jewish people, fueled by the ghosts of the far-right movements of the past. But today, the friction is fueled by bread and butter politics. France needs Arab oil, they need Arab investment, and they have a massive internal Arab population whose votes determine who sits in the Élysée Palace. For an Israeli leadership that demands total loyalty, France's pragmatism looks like a stab in the back. This has led to a bitter cycle where Israel views Europe with contempt, and Europe views Israel as an uncontrollable spark in a powder keg. But France isn't just sitting on its hands, they are playing a double game. On the surface, they play the moral arbiter, the diplomat. President Macron flies from Moscow to Kiev, or from Washington to the Middle East, calling for tea and dialogue while the missiles are being fueled. He wants the world to see him as the great peacemaker, the man who can talk sense into the irrational. It's a performance he's given before, during the early days of the Ukraine war, where he spent his mornings in Moscow and his afternoons in Kiev, only to achieve nothing but a few photo opportunities. While Britain and Germany sent weapons and financial aid to the front lines, France focused more on diplomacy and mediation. However, beneath the diplomatic veneer, France is a military powerhouse that shouldn't be underestimated. They aren't just a nation of cafes and philosophy, they are a country that makes its living through the export of violence. The French Foreign Legion, the legendary mercenaries who fight in the most forgotten corners of Africa and the Middle East, is one of the most elite fighting forces on the planet. And right now, France has moved its most dangerous chess piece into the Mediterranean. The Charles de Gaulle. This isn't just an aircraft carrier. It's the only nuclear-powered carrier in the world outside the United States Navy. The Charles de Gaulle is a ghost on the water. Because it's nuclear-powered, it doesn't leave a trail of diesel smoke. It can operate indefinitely without refueling, prowling the seas with a deadly, silent efficiency. It carries 40 Rafale fighter jets, the multi-role Predators that are the direct competitors to America's F-35. The Rafale is a Generation 4. 5 fighter that can do everything: shoot down helicopters, dogfight other jets, or drop precision bombs on ground targets. France often sells these jets to partners who cannot easily access American systems. When the US won't sell F-35s to Middle Eastern powers because Israel says no, France is right there with a contract for the Rafale. It's a multi-billion-dollar middle finger to American defense hegemony. By positioning the Charles de Gaulle near the coast of Israel, France is sending a message. They aren't necessarily there to protect Israel, and they aren't there to help the US. They are there to watch, to monitor, and to ensure that no one forgets that France is an independent power. This independence is a legacy of Charles de Gaulle, the towering leader who defined 20th century France. During World War II, when France surrendered to the Nazis, de Gaulle refused to accept it. He fled to England, set up a government in exile, and demanded to be treated as an equal by Churchill and Roosevelt. He was stubborn, arrogant, and brilliant. He knew that if France didn't act like a great power, the world would treat it like a vassal state. This resentment toward the US solidified in the 1950s. At the Battle of Dien Bien Phu in Vietnam, the French were being crushed and begged the Americans for help, either a massive airstrike or even a tactical nuclear weapon. The US said no, fearing a war with Russia and China. France never forgot that abandonment. Then came the Suez Crisis in 1956. France, Britain, and Israel had successfully seized the Suez Canal, only for the US to walk in and demand they leave, effectively kicking France and Britain out of the Middle East for good. From that moment on, France decided it would never trust an American promise again. When de Gaulle became president in the 1960s, he revolutionized France. He launched the strategic autonomy policy. He developed a sovereign nuclear arsenal, making France the fourth nation to join the nuclear club. Crucially, France developed its own tech, while Britain simply bought American systems. To this day, Britain can't fire a nuclear missile without an American OTP code. France, however, holds its own keys. They can end the world without asking for permission from Washington. This fierce defiance, this stubborn independence, is the DNA of the modern French state. It's why they pulled their command out of NATO for decades and why they continue to act as a wildcard in every global crisis. This brings us to the modern era of technocracy. Macron is the ultimate product of this system. Technocracy is ruled by the experts, by the numbers, by cold, calculated science rather than human emotion or political ideology. In a technocratic state, you don't listen to the people, you look at the data. If the data says a war is bad for the economy, you don't fight it, no matter how many flags are being waved. Countries like Singapore, Germany, and Japan have used this model to achieve massive success, and Macron is trying to use it to keep France relevant. He isn't a gentleman or a hero, he is a manager of a great power who sees the US as an erratic, unreliable partner. The tension reached a breaking point in 2021 with the AUKUS deal. France had a $56 billion contract to build submarines for Australia. It was the biggest defense deal in their history.
Everything.
In the middle of the night, the US and UK went behind France's back, States convinced Australia to scrap the deal and signed a new one for American-made nuclear subs. France was humiliated. They recalled their ambassadors, a move usually reserved for enemies. Though the US eventually paid a small apology fee of $600 million, the damage was done. France realized that American interests would always come first. Now step back and look at the board again. Because this is where the story becomes far more dangerous. In the Middle East, Israel is playing a game of checkmate against Iran. They have built an alliance with Azerbaijan, a Muslim nation that borders Iran and shares deep ethnic ties with 20 million Iranians living under Tehran's rule. Israel has placed its eye there, intelligence bases and radar systems that look directly into Iran's heart. In exchange, Israel teaches Azerbaijan the art of modern warfare. This makes Iran furious. They see their Muslim brothers selling out to the Zionists. It's a mess of religion, oil, and ancient grudges that France wants no part of. The war is also moving into the psychological realm. Rumors are swirling that Iran managed to hit a US THAAD radar system, the crown jewel of American missile defense. While no major Western news agency has confirmed this, the mere suggestion of it is a victory for Tehran. In war, the perception of a hit is often as powerful as the hit itself. Meanwhile, Iran is using low-tech genius, like painting decoys of fighter jets on the ground to trick American precision bombs into hitting empty tarmac. It's a war of the expensive against the clever, and France is watching it all from the deck of the Charles de Gaulle, refusing to pick a side. The ultimate failure of the United States is the alienation of its allies. When your friends start to feel like they are being used as shields or ATMs, they stop showing up to the fight. France is proving that a NATO without American leadership is not just a dream, but a growing reality. If France, Italy, and Sweden, the military powerhouses of Europe, decide to form their own independent bloc, the American century will officially be over. They have the technology, they have the nuclear weapons, and increasingly, they have the motive. As the fires in the Middle East grow, France remains the cold, calculating observer. They have seen the rise and fall of empires, and they have the scars to prove that loyalty is a luxury they can no longer afford. For the United States, the danger isn't just the missiles coming from Iran, it's the silence coming from Paris. The world is no longer a unipolar playground where Washington calls the shots and the world obeys. It is a dark, complex thriller where the good guys are out for themselves, and the allies are just enemies who haven't turned yet. If the Iranian crisis spirals out of control, don't expect the French to save the day. They've already decided that some fires are better left to burn,